Hey team, Timbo here. Before we launch into another highly beneficial episode of the Small Business Big Marketing Show, I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you to help your business. You know, every single one of us operates in a very crowded marketplace. There's no shortage of marketing consultants. There's no shortage of vets, plumbers, clothing store owners, cafe owners. The list goes on. So that raises the all-important question, what the hell is going to set us apart from the pack? What's going to be your point of difference that will have you being more visible, valuable and connected in the industry you love? The answer's you. You need to become a key person of influence that your prospects trust. In doing so, you can charge what you're worth and opportunities you never even dreamt of will come your way. Now, if that sounds interesting, and I'm reckoning it would, I'd encourage you to grab a free hard copy of the Key Person of Influence book over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. Hey, speaking of mission critical business concepts, you do realise you are who Google says you are, right? I mean, if you're not ranking for key search terms on page 1 of the world's biggest search engine, then it kind of raises the question, does your business exist? I mean, is there a page 2 or 3 of Google? I don't know. I've never been there. If you're not ranking well, then I suggest contacting Web Central, who are specialists at getting your business found online. Not only can they build you a custom website, but they'll optimise it so that you appear in the search results every time. Head over to webcentral.com.au/Timbo and check out their SEO booster pack after the show. When Woolworths decided to come to town, today's guest could have panicked and accepted the fact that Australia's biggest supermarket chain would kill off his business. Instead, he rolled the dice and more than doubled his retail footprint. He's now the founder of one of Australia's hottest up-and-coming franchises. This is a story, team, of courage, determination and being true to one's values. I think you're going to love it.
Well, I said, welcome to a small business marketing show, where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Timbo Reid.
And welcome back to another episode of Australia's #1 marketing show. I am your host, Timbo Reid, but you... oh, so much more importantly, you're a motivated business owner who is ready to crank out some great marketing to build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it deserves to be. And boy, oh boy, does it deserve to be. Big show today. I reckon you're going to love this one. Paul Medeiros is the founder and head franchisor for the Source bulk foods business. What started as a fruit shop up in beautiful Mullumbimby is now a darling of the Australian franchise scene, and boy oh boy does Paul take us behind the scenes of how he's made it that way. Pen and paper at the ready, I would suggest, team. I also have a listener who shares some big wins they've had since listening to this show. Do love an action taker. Plus, I share part 3 of the 4-part series in which I detail some highly clickable email subject lines that will get your emails open more often. Yep, you guessed it. As per usual, there is marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Hey, coming up, team, great interview with a guy whose business is on fire in a very good way, and those next 5 email subject lines. But a quick check-in. Had some great feedback from last week's interview with Joyce Ong of the Young Musicians Academy, and I just want to share a little text exchange Joyce and I had to show the success she's had since appearing on the show. When she first heard the interview, she texted me, she said, "Wow, Timbo, you know how to make me sound good." I texted back with an LOL, lol, and saying, "Think of me as a cheap accessory that people think is worth thousands," with a little wink. Then Joyce came back with a clanger, a good clanger. "Ha, ha, ha," she says, "let me know if there's anything I can do to help you in the future. You've totally launched my systemising business and I've made like nearly $20,000 in 3 days. Hello. Come on the Small Business Big Marketing Show and make $20,000 in 3 days. That's how we roll around here. I always find that guests who do come on this show, something special happens. I don't know. It's just how it is. I don't engineer it that way. Some guests find themselves on getting a bigger media appearance or a speaking engagement or $20,000 in the bank. Hey, well done, Joyce. Thank you to everyone who's been tweeting me and Facebooking me and texting me about the fact that they've heard me on Virgin Australia and for letting Virgin Australia know that they love hearing the show up in the air. If that's you, send them a text. Say, at Virgin Australia, I love hearing Timbo's show in the air, 35,000 feet up. And finally, a bit of an announcement. Keep a date. I can't give you the date yet, but next week I will be able to give you a date in late November for the next business outsourcing tour that I'm going to take to the Philippines. It'll be the third one, and they're a lot of fun. They're a real eye-opener, and they'll change your business forever, basically. And I'll be going along with a great friend of mine on the shows. So it's going to be a ripper. Late November. I'll share that date next week. But if you want to be the first to know, register over at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. Just join my mailing list there, and you will be the first to know. Coming up after this fireside chat, I share another 5 highly clickable email subject lines. But first, let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. Paul Medeiros is a cubicle escapee, who left a very high-paying, high-pressure executive position in a large listed company to start a better life for him and his wife up near beautiful Byron Bay. Now, Paul is also the founder, owner and head franchisor of the Source Bulk Foods business, SOURCE that is, and it's an amazing new retail concept that really has taken the Australian franchise world by storm in the last year or two. Let me explain what it's all about. Basically, it's a good old-fashioned grocery shopping experience done in a very modern way. The shops look and feel very rustic and organic. There's lots of exposed brick and wood, and they sell around 400 different varieties of nuts, seeds, grains, cleaning and personal care products. And you can buy as little or as much as you like. And their big point of difference is it's waste-free shopping. You've got to bring your own bottles, containers and bags to refill because the Source is plastic bag free. Yeah, got to love that. So tune into this. You're going to love it. Paul shares some absolute gold. He talks about his escape from the cubicle, how he spent 3 years deciding on his next move, how he took on one of the biggest supermarket chains and won, certainly his business did, and he's got a very clever approach to local area marketing. I started off by asking Paul to paint a picture of his last few months battling it out in the corporate world.
I guess prior to that, I always wanted to start a life up in Northern Rivers with my family, or start a family up here. So it was probably 12 months before I made the decision to stop. I was getting the itch. And for some reason, I always had the inkling that I'd be working for myself one day, although I learnt a lot in the corporate world, so to speak. But
just on that, Paul, what was your biggest lesson? Because you learn a lot, but what was your biggest lesson in the corporate world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest lesson was that I was being stifled with decision making and things that I was passionate about, and I guess the lesson was that you can't really move forward if you've got that sort of mindset where you want to, give things a go for yourself, or you want to introduce new ideas. You're a little bit stifled by upper management and what have you. So that was probably the most frustrating thing, and that was that when you've got a certain mindset that you want to do something for yourself, that it breaks you quite a lot.
So are you a creative person by nature?
I don't know if it's creative as such, but I do have a lot of ideas.
Right.
And I do need help implementing those ideas.
Isn't it insane? I'm sure the entire corporate world isn't like this. Maybe it is, mate. I don't know. But, when you do have an idea and when you are excited about it and when you do want to get it to market and then when you're stuck in that cubicle, you've then got to have meetings with other people and share your idea.
Absolutely. Everyone knows the red tape story and all the bureaucracy that goes with a lot of the bigger organisations. But, on one hand, I can understand they've got their own strategies in place, and a lot of them do take on board, and if they've structured themselves right, they will take on board a lot of the better ideas. Unfortunately, most businesses don't do that, and they don't allow for, much contribution at all from the front line, so to speak. So, and in this case, that was where I was at, and it was just becoming increasingly frustrating.
So tell me then about that moment. You've gone, okay, I'm out of here, because it takes courage.
Yeah, I had enough. It was just, on top of not being able to put forward my own thinking, I was being asked to do things that were outside of my values as well, and that was the last straw for me. And so I took the plunge. Could
you give an example of when you were kind of challenged at that level of values?
Sure. Yeah, look, it was just, without going into detail too much, I was basically being asked to undercut other businesses, and, I didn't feel that it was very fair because I was working for a large organisation, and so I just realised that it would affect other families, and some people may say, well, that's business, but it just doesn't align with my values. And in my opinion, you can grow a business ethically and morally, and you don't have to do that at all.
Good on you, mate. Well, and we're going to talk about your current business, Source Bulk Foods, but I'm assuming you've carried all those learnings across into it and more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was a little bit of a fork in the road, though, because I was faced with, capitalism and, corporation again, that sort of lifestyle, I guess. And then I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to do it the way that I was involved in. And I thought, can it be done morally and ethically? And at the end of the day, if you put the focus into the people you're working with and the relationships you're being dealt with every day, and put people at the forefront, then it all just happens naturally. It's got to be a genuine process, though. And if that's the case, you just find that everything else follows.
Interesting.
So there is a way to do it.
Well, I want to understand a bit more about that, because that sounds easy to say, probably harder to implement. Before you explain how you've done that within Source Bulk Foods, just you left the corporate world in Sydney. How did you, and your wife, I'm guessing she had a major role in the decision. How did you decide what next?
Good question. We had a period of about 3 odd years, or probably a little bit more, where we were, researching businesses and areas to move to. And in that time, after I left that position I was referring to, I was tinkering around with a few other odds and ends, a few other jobs in between. And I think we ended up writing about 20 business plans for different businesses that we were going to purchase all over Australia. And it was they were either not affordable or didn't have much of a return or for us to just sustain a good living, or it was just too cold for us to move to those areas. So we were just a bit patient, and then one came along up here in the Northern Rivers, and that was the one we decided to pursue.
And that's the Mullumbimby Fruit Shop, is it?
That was a little fruit shop that we bought in Mullumbimby.
Okay, hold that thought. 20 business plans, 3 years. This always fascinates me. What, did you have a stack load of cash in the bank, or were you doing some consulting work, or how does one do that?
Yeah, well, I had the jobs that I was working in between. I was working at one point, 2 jobs to. Not in the corporate world, but just to sustain myself until we could do that.
Like what? Stacking shelves, or what were you doing?
I was a manager at another small business, store manager. I think I did I had 2 store management positions, and at some point I was selling blinds and awnings, and I did a few bits and pieces. And it was kind of nice because it was grounding, and it was almost like not a challenge, but it was almost like an awakening to sort of step down from a higher pressured role back into the real world of the storefront.
I find that inspiring. Part of me, putting myself in that position, thinks is scary. Was your ego bruised at all, or you completely accepted that, hey, this is a moment in time, I'm no longer a corporate exec, and I'm just going to ride with it for the time being until the next big idea shows itself? The
day that we made a decision, or that I made a decision to leave the corporate world, was there was just something in my mind, and thankfully in my wife's mind at the time, that just changed. We just needed to simplify our lives. We were just fed up with the complexity of the big smoke and the rat race, as some people call it. And at that point, you kind of lose your ego, and your stacking shelves all of a sudden becomes, the best thing in the world.
Wow.
And I had a moment when I was in the fruit shop when we moved up. It was about a month after we moved up, and I was cutting pumpkins and wrapping them up. And I thought to myself, what have I done? I've gone from this relatively high-powered pressure position to cutting pumpkins, and then 2 weeks later, cutting pumpkins was the best thing I had ever done in my life. It was amazing. The ego just goes, and when your mind is freed up by all the stuff that doesn't matter, and it's decluttered, and you've made a decision to simplify in that format, it just opens up to so much more. But it opens up to what's important, I guess.
Oh, mate, that's beautiful. You could have, I'm guessing, at that moment when you were cutting the pumpkins, gone, oh, maybe we just head back. But you obviously took a big breath.
It was difficult because I was coming from this ego-driven scenario, I guess, and you have to be a little bit like that, I guess, when you're in the corporate world.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of I felt bigger than that. I felt like I was more important than cutting pumpkins, but it didn't take me too long that cutting that pumpkin was probably the most important thing. And the most important lesson for me moving forward from that point in my life.
At a business level, the Mullumbimby Fruit Shop. Okay, let's just paint the picture here for overseas listeners. Mullumbimby, sure. Paul, help me. Back the hills behind Byron Bay. Would that be a fair kind of?
Yeah, it's sort of in the Byron Bay hinterland, not quite up in the hills, but just at the base of the mountain. It's a small community of about 3,000 people. Very, very community-minded, very village-like. And it was only a very small fruit and veg shop, maybe about 50 or 60 square metres when we first bought it, and maybe doing only about $200,000 a year, $250,000 a year in revenue. So it was basically returning enough to pay the rent and put a little bit of food on the table. Obviously, we utilised the food in the shop as well, which helped.
Yeah, right. Eat the profits. So it ticks all the boxes at a lifestyle level. But I'm interested. You've identified and found a business that was under-marketed, was not optimised, and you saw huge upside? Yeah,
100%. It was, obviously being a very small business, it was affordable, and we just saw it as an opportunity. And you had to have a little bit of faith in your own ability, or at least in your own values, or the way the values resonated with the local community. And we had that confidence, and we both worked in the store, so we didn't have too much of an outlay in terms of expenses. We had one other helper, but we were in a good position at that point. And basically, just by getting involved in the community and helping the community, we realised that it comes back tenfold. And again, I go back to doing it genuinely. And at that point, we never thought of doing the bulk food at all, or we never thought of increasing sales. We were happy just to be part of that community and genuinely helping schools and helping other organisations within that community. And people see that, and when you do it genuinely, people resonate with that.
So would it be fair to say, even though there's a couple of motherhood statements in there about getting involved in the community and doing it genuinely. Is that what got you to get that business from doing $300,000 a year to what I understand over the course of the next 3 years, you got it to about 1.1? Was that your secret sauce, just being part of the community? And what's that look like?
Yeah, well, we saw that after maybe the first year, and we could see that the sales were ramping up just by being us and being genuinely interested. Obviously, at some point, we thought, well, this is fantastic and it's working, and we increased our level of input into the community. A, because we were more involved after a year or two, and B, because we saw the benefits. So it became a mutually beneficial thing to do.
What are you talking? Like providing prizes to school raffles, and what does getting involved in the community mean? Yeah,
to start with, we were donating vouchers, donating fruit baskets, things like that. And then eventually, I'm not sure if you know the Easter show, you've got that massive fruit and veg display. We had a very small version of that maybe took up about 2 or 3 metres wide by about 2 metres deep. And we donated the fruit. I went there and put together a little display with a smiley face for the kids, and we donated all that, I think, for the next 5 or 6 years. And eventually I joined a few committees, started a farmers market committee, and eventually became secretary of the Mullumbimby Chamber of Commerce, which we restarted. It had been around before. But again, this was a natural progression. It wasn't something that we did to necessarily gain more sales. It was just a natural progression.
Really? Can I just challenge you on that? There's nothing wrong with doing that to gain more sales, but was it genuinely... There must have been an underlying agenda that said, hey, if we get involved in the community, if we kickstart the Chamber of Commerce, if we're seen as leading a kind of economic rebirth in Mullumbimby, then we're going to sell more?
Absolutely. It wasn't until I got to the Chamber of Commerce level that my mindset became that way, and we were doing that as a group. So it wasn't only for my business. It was obviously I was in there to generate for the town and generate more business for the town and other businesses. But at that point, I did realise that the more people we bring in, obviously, the more successful we were going to be.
Yeah, right.
We also had Woolworth coming in at the time, and I thought that was a very big threat. And very early on, I aligned myself with some of the groups that were trying to find ways to overcome that threat. And I learned a lot from being involved in those groups. And eventually, of the people, of the business owners in town, it seemed to be the ones that were involved early that were talking about ways to get around that tended to do better.
Geez, mate, that must have been a very, very stressful moment. Woolworths, one of the two biggest supermarket chains in the country, they're coming to Mullumbimby, undercutting every fruit seller within 100 kilometres.
Yes, it was very stressful. 2 years, 2 years of it, I think.
Paul.
Yeah.
I feel sick, mate. I feel sick.
I felt like that for 2 years. It began as a fight, and then it sort of slowly turned into, how do we get around it, and then how do we survive, and then how do we thrive?
Well, how? What did you do?
We ended up taking a lease in the shop or in the vacancy next door to the fruit shop, and that was probably the hardest decision because here we are confronted with a threat and, taking on more business. But it was probably the best thing we did for it because it gave us an opportunity to increase our product range, and we put a deli in and started juicing, put in some lunch items, and a few other grocery lines, which eventually led to trialling the bulk foods.
Uh-huh.
No, that was probably one of the better moves that we made in that time.
Gee, sir, it sounds so counterproductive. But, here you're staring down the barrel of Woolies and you go, no, we're going to expand. So was the expansion about increasing your footprint so that you looked like a more significant player, or was it about just being able to go, well, the more shop space, the more we sell, and therefore we can stay afloat?
Yeah. The thought was, if we were going to get hit, we were probably going to get hit with our biggest product lines, and that was the fruit and veg, and that's where we would have suffered. And given that was almost 100% of our business, we needed to increase our product line, by say 50%. And so when we opened the deli and the juice bar and put in all the other groceries, the fruit and veg became, I guess, about 60%. So we were sort of minimising our risk if Woolworths did have an impact. But it is scary. I guess it's one of those things. I was always taught, and I've seen this before, when times are tough, people tend to cut hours and cut people, and unfortunately it's probably one of the biggest mistakes, because that's your key. The people and your service is the key, and that's what's going to get people in your door when everyone else is going backwards. And that was sort of a similar mentality that I had by increasing the business rather than scaling it down out of fear.
Was there not... you said you had 2 years of feeling sick, and I'm just recovering now for you. There is another argument to say, well, a community like Mullumbimby are fairly grassroots, organic people, I'm guessing. They're not going to be interested in Woolworths. In fact, quite the opposite will happen. They will completely avoid Woolworths and put all their money into businesses like yours. Couldn't you have kind of sat back and taken that attitude?
I could have, but that's sort of pie in the sky. You kind of, that's taking the control out of your hands, and you kind of, I don't know, that didn't feel like a comfortable option for me, even though I thought that if that was the case, that would only benefit the cause and what we were doing. But I didn't want to rely on that alone.
Gotcha.
And and as it happened, I don't know if you know Mullumbimby that well, but there's a lot of people that put up placards, and it was interesting because out of all the committees and meetings that we went to, half of those people, as soon as Woolworths opened, they were in that door looking for the cheaper product. So
money talks.
At the end of the day, and that's how these big companies sort of they do it. They'll open up in a town that's relatively small, go in and trade at a loss for 5, 6, 7, 8 years until the town starts to get bigger, and then they start to recoup some of their losses, and eventually they become profitable.
Paul, you start selling more. You doubled your shop, your footprint. You are now selling grains and all these whole food type items, plus deli, and this is where Source Bulk Foods is born, correct? Pretty
much. We invested in some bins to trial the bulk food in the deli side. And probably after about 6 months, we just knew that we had to go down that path. So initially we were intending on increasing it within the deli and just reducing the packaged items. But again, fortunately, we had a vacancy come up on the other side of the fruit shop, so to the left-hand side. And we decided to take it.
And that was completely selling what?
Just bulk food.
Just bulk food.
That's where the Source Bulk Foods originated. So we started that. We went into that vacancy as a separate business rather than increasing the existing business. Again, with the intention that if it did go well or if it wasn't going as well, we had the flexibility of moving it on and just keep our little fruit and veg venture going. As it turned out, it started trading better than the fruit and veg shop, and that was when we decided to trial the format in Sydney.
How fantastic! So explain to the listeners the concept behind Source Bulk Foods.
It's basically just taking it back, how it used to be a while ago, where you just scoop out the product you need into a bag and you take it to the counter, weigh it up, and off you go. It's a little bit more of a personal experience. There's more interaction, more education in terms of what the product's good for and where it comes from. So we just find that, especially up here in Mullumbimby, people are more interested in where it's coming from and the nutritional benefits and what have you. So it works well up here. We were just unsure whether it would work in a city format where people are more about the convenience, I guess, and that the quick pick up and go. So it was a little bit daunting moving it into Sydney, but it worked out well.
You've sort of gone back to your roots then. So that decision with your wife again to say, hey, listen, we've had a pretty good life up here in good old Mullumbimby. Weather's good, but I think we'll go back down to the biggest city in Australia and start a business. How's that look?
Yeah, it did. We didn't actually move. I spent about 6 weeks setting up the store, and at that time it was hammer and nails and sleeping on the floor for me to set up the shop. But
literally?
Yeah, literally. We were still based up here. So my wife was up here, and at the time we had a little guy. He was about 2 or 3 when we set up the shop in Sydney. So she stayed up here looking after the fruit and veg and the bulk food shop up here, and I went down there and literally slept on the floor, built the shelves, because back then we didn't have a fit-out crew, so I had to do it all myself, and basically stayed there for, I think, about 2 or 3 months to get the shop going, set it up, train the people that were there, and all of a sudden we had a second shop going.
You make that all sound so easy, mate, and that is exactly why I do this show, because the courage business owners like you show to do something like that, I just find amazing. I really do.
Oh, I appreciate it. I wish it was as easy as I probably made it sound, but you've just got to do it. There were so many times that we thought we've opened up a can of worms, so to speak. So if it's not us, it's somebody else, and you just have to back yourself and follow your instinct.
What gave you such confidence? Again, I come back to the Mullumbimby community. Not been there, right? But I can see it. I know exactly what it'd be like. It'd be the most beautiful, close community that care about the environment, that care where things come from, that care about the family and community. And I can see why selling bulk foods in that environment would work a treat. And I can see why, that just brought the business to a whole new level. But what gave you the confidence to think that is going to happen in the complete opposite environment of Sydney?
That is a very good question. We were basically challenged with going from a rent of say $25,000 a year in Mullumbimby to about $120,000 or $130,000 in Sydney for that second shop. And not only that, we were signing up for 5 years. So you had to have a little bit of confidence to make that sort of call. But these are the sort of decisions that I was freed up to do. And I go back to earlier in the conversation, when you have ideas in the corporate world and you want to move the business forward in a certain format and certain confidence that you've got in the decision, you just can't do it. Having to make decisions for my own business was relatively easy because I could do it. I could actually give it a go, whereas before I couldn't. So I could have been confidence, could have been stupidity. Depends how you look at it, but either way, it worked out well.
Mate, it sure did. Well, speaking of working out well, can you wrap some numbers? Let's go ahead to today and wrap some numbers around, because you've franchised. I'm skipping a lot here, but I will come back to the franchising idea. But where's Source Bulk Foods at now? How many stores, annual turnover, number of staff? Give us what you got.
So we've basically got 30 stores that are trading, and there's one that should be opening in a couple of weeks, and then another one about 2 or 3 weeks further. So it'll be 32 stores, and we own. My wife and I own 2 of them, and the franchise company own 2 of them, and basically the rest are franchised out. So for us, it was a matter of, we've got this idea. If we don't increase the brand and the business, again, somebody else will do it. So we had to move fast. And lack of capital meant that we couldn't necessarily open up our own stores. So franchising or franchise model was the best way forward. And again, it aligned with our values of helping other families and helping other people achieve the success that we had achieved. And again, out of not being greedy and following that value, again, it's worked out well. We're very careful to as to who we bring into the business, I guess, or into the franchise. So we do need people that have the same or similar values to be able to move forward with the business. And the reason is, and I guess that most other businesses work in a similar way. If you don't have a passion for what you're selling or for the concept or for the format, or you don't live the lifestyle of the product that you're in business for, it's not going to work as well. And so having partners that align with that makes it a lot easier.
How do you do that? Because it's like some people interview well. Some people can put their best foot forward in a franchise application, and then you take them on, and they're it's all about greed, and the franchisors are mongrel, and they should do this and that. What's your secret sauce for identifying these great people?
I'm sure there's probably people in our business that are still saying the same thing.
No doubt, mate. Every franchise has them.
Yeah, look. If that's the case, then I'm not doing my job properly. So that's just another lesson to make sure that you're looking after them. But look, I grew up in Portugal, and so I was used to the personal interactions and conversations and family gatherings. And for me, it's important to sit down with people to see what they're about and get to know them. So when people approach us, if basically they start talking about money and figures, that rings alarm bells for me. When they start talking about the concept and how it resonates with them and what have you, then that sort of puts me a little bit more at ease. And we have a system where we probably sit down for an interview. We sit down for an interview the first time, and then we'll probably have one or two further face-to-face meetings at some point soon after, just general meetings, just for lunch or coffee, before we even start talking about the nitty-gritty. During those meetings, obviously, there's a lot of questions that are asked, and we do answer them. There's no issue with that. But when people start talking about the finances and how much money am I going to make, that's when the alarm bells go off for me.
Is it quite interesting? When we did a chat before this interview a few weeks ago, one of the things you said to me was that so many, and I quote you, so many things open up when you're not chasing money. Yeah,
but that's so true. I said it before in this conversation too, when I was just cutting pumpkins and I wasn't, selling awnings at commission and focusing solely on making money. It just freed up my mind space to so many other things, and different doors do open up. And so I guess it ties in with that the concept of when you love what you're doing, it will work. It automatically generates interest, and you automatically generate interest within your customers and within your network for the business. So I firmly believe it. If you don't chase the money, and if you do things with the right intentions, and you're committed to that it will come.
It's interesting, Paul. You're about the 330th successful small business owner I've been lucky enough to have a fireside chat with on this show, and I think almost without exception, there is just a passion for what they do. They love it. There's no complaining about it. There's problems with the business, of course, but they just can't wait to get up in the morning and do whatever's required. Yeah. So
it's not work. It's a role that you have, and and if you love what you're doing, you do that role. You play that role well. But it's not work. It's hard to explain. It is hard work, but it's not.
Yeah, I get it.
A job, so to speak. Yeah.
Tell me, you've come sort of full circle in a sense. You are now a franchisor. You're running a significant business. I noticed you avoided the question of turnover very well. Thank you. But
I'll get back to that. That's okay.
Well, what are we talking? I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar franchise now, correct?
Yeah. The difficult thing in answering that question is because you've got different cost centres. Each cost centre has their own return, and as a franchisor, we have a return as a franchisor company. So, I can put together all of the store revenues and give you that, but that's not what the franchise company is returning. As a group, that is the case, but because they're separate cost centres, that's all an individual basis. So it's a bit of a difficult...
I get it. It's doing okay, but my point is this. The start of this conversation, you're leaving corporate life in Sydney at a big publicly, can't even say that, publicly listed company. You are now back running 32 franchise stores and all the headaches that come with it. How's life up in Mullumbimby these days?
Fantastic. Still up here, still enjoying the sunshine that it brings, but it's a lot different to what I was doing before because of all the processes that we've just spoken about and having the right people. It's almost like you've got 30 different families. And somebody once said when I first started franchising, they said, you've got to look at each relationship as a marriage because you have to be able to tell them certain things, they have to be able to tell you certain things, and you have to work it out. You have to make sure that relationship survives in order for the group to survive. And so it almost is like 30 different families that I speak with every day, as opposed to back being in the corporate world where it was all hard and fast and meetings every day and thumping of the table and things like that.
All those cliches. So the big difference is, it's yours, you're passionate about it, you believe in it, and it's a completely different energy and dynamic. Yeah. One thing I want to explore, just drilling down, Paul, into the marketing and branding of Source Bulk Foods, because it's kind of what you'd expect. I mean, listeners, you walk into these shops, there are rows and rows of plastic containers containing everything from dried mango slices, which are my favourite, by the way, Paul, through to...
They're pretty good.
They're pretty good. You could probably bring the price down, mate. I think I'm paying $76 a kilogram. It's killing me. And my family like them too. But you've got rices and oats and grains, and it's just literally plastic container as far as the eye can see, paper bags, you write a code on it, you take the brown paper bag up to the register and you're out of there. It's a very simplistic process and structure, very light on staff. But how did you go about pulling the visual brand together?
The idea of the fit out in Mullumbimby was basically that it was minimal, simplistic, hygienic, clean, simple. And we sort of kept to all those things you've described for that reason. When I did uni, I remember going back to one of the lectures. Someone said you've got to make sure you've got straight lines in your store, because going back to the ancient ways and the primal ways, your mind is afraid of corners, so it thinks that there's a saber-toothed tiger about to jump out at you. So if you can see right through the back of the store, your mind kind of eases up a little bit and lets go of that anticipation. And so, and there's a lot of information online about all this, and I find all that interesting. And so we researched that a lot on top of what I'd learnt at uni and put together the concept that you see. And the comment that I get, and I see this on people's faces when they walk into a shop, is that it's so simple and so clean and so easy, and that's because they're not confronted with all the visual pollution that they're stepping out of when they walk into our store. Yeah.
Do you rely on, for foot traffic, are you relying on getting stores in good locations? Are you running social media campaigns? You're running TV ads? What are you doing?
Yeah, we do a lot of social media campaigns, and it's probably been our most successful.
Really?
We being a foodie outlet, and the sort of circles, I guess, that our social media cover are part of the foodie group. The foodie revolution, and the zero waste, and the sustainability, all of that. So there's a lot of food bloggers that are out there.
They would love you.
Absolutely, we love them as well.
Yep. How do you show your love for them?
We basically have tried to recruit as many of the good ones as ambassadors for us. And so we basically, either pay them a fee or whatever they're requesting, or we give them the produce for them to cook with. So we donate a lot of produce to these ambassadors, and they'll go and cook or do what they do with the particular items that they request, and then they basically post about the products that they've made, and in turn our business. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, big time. So using social influencers, I had Jules Lund from the new social business called, he's got a business called Tribe, which is basically businesses like yours or any size, finding who the social influencers are in your community and working with them so that they spread your message. Absolutely. That's exactly what we do. So each ambassador that we have, we've aligned to the store so that it's localised. There's an ambassador that we have, Jo Winton from Quirky Cooking. So she lives up in the Atherton region, and she's a very well followed food blogger. And so by aligning her and creating a relationship with the can store up there, it's a good synergy. So we do exactly the same thing through our network, and it works well. Paul, I'm just inspired, mate. I love the courage you've shown. I love the simplicity that you've applied to creating what is now a significant business, and I really do wish you all the best. What can we expect in what's 5 years' time? How many franchises around the country or around the world, maybe? It's quite difficult to look 5 years 5 ahead when it comes to the number. 5 months is probably better. We made a decision to consolidate this year, and I know that you probably hear that a lot, but we had to forego store openings to be able to do that. And you'll probably see a ramp up of store openings in the coming year. Our number is about 50 at the moment, so if we can do that by, say, in the next 6 to 12 months, that would be a positive. And then I can see us ending up somewhere between 80 and 100. And hopefully going into some overseas markets. Wow. What would be the first one? Probably New Zealand. Yeah, right. That makes sense. Yeah, it's. I was actually over there only 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it's amazing how much of a food culture they have, or fresh food precincts that they've created throughout New Zealand. Well, New Zealand's just like a really big Mullumbimby, really, isn't it? It really is. I was pleasantly surprised, and I just couldn't believe just how far they actually they were when it came to healthy eating and sustainability, and the zero waste movement. I was very pleasantly surprised. Have you seen competition snapping at your heels now? Is anyone else set up? Yeah, pretty much. As soon as we opened, within about 6 months, we had somebody that had copied. I say copied, but they introduced a few different scenarios. But yeah, look, there's a couple of players. Not necessarily with the number of stores that we have, but they're. We can't rest on our laurels. We know they're there. We'd be silly to think that we're the only ones that can do a good job, so we just need to be on our toes constantly. And being on your toes means just continue to do what you do and not focus on them, or something more? Yeah. Look, I guess the biggest lesson I learned with that, and when it comes to competition, is you've just got to concentrate on what you do and what you do well, and obviously fix the things that your customers are telling you you're not doing as well. And mate, just buy the shop next door. That's another way to do it. So, look, you've got to be always aware of your competition, but you shouldn't put too much energy into what they're doing. Focus on what you're doing and get it right. Love it, mate. Hey, so listeners, thesourcebulkfoods.com.au is where you can find out all about this wonderful concept. And Paul, if people wanted to hit you up, are you on Twitter? Can they find you there? I'm not on Twitter. I'm not very social media savvy. You leave that to someone else? Yeah, I leave that to somebody that knows what they're doing with it. But send him a smoke signal. That's right. I can see all around from where I'm sitting in Mullumbimby. But there's always a way to find me if you put a request in through the website. Good on you, buddy. Lovely to chat.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, there you go. Paul Medeiros of the Source Bulk Foods. Great story, hey? Oh, boy. A man true to his values, loving what he does, and he's on fire. Him and his beautiful wife. Hey, coming up, I share 5 highly clickable email subject lines, or 5 more, I should say. I've already shared 10 the last couple of weeks, plus my top 3 attention grabbers from that fireside chat with Paul. But first, here's a word from a couple of businesses that want to help you build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it deserves to be. Support for this show comes from Key Person of Influence, the world's leading business accelerator program for those wanting to be an industry thought leader. Their 5-step KPI method teaches you how to nail your pitch, publish content, productise your offer, raise your profile, and partner with performers. I asked co-founder Glenn Carlson, what's with the P fetish?
Oh, yeah, I suppose it is a bit of a fetish, isn't it? Mate, I guess we're just a bit obsessed. You know, fetishes, obsessions, we're just business geeks, mate. We believe there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, and we're all in. We are just all in. And if we find best practices and ideas as a result of what's working for our clients all around the world, we just want to bring it to people. And so far, the best framework that we've found to be able to do that, to really accelerate that entrepreneurial journey in the shortest time, is the 5 Ps. So, mate, get in on the fetish.
KPI, where fetishes rule. For a free hard or audio copy of their Amazon bestseller, visit keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. Oh, and a little warning. Don't read it before bed. You just won't sleep. Support for this show also comes from Web Central, who know exactly what Google want. Verity Ma, their Chief Marketing Officer, spells out how to please the world's biggest search engine.
Every time Google comes back to your website and crawls it, they need to see that your website has been changed, updated with fresh content and new imagery. For example, say if you're a restaurant, you want to update your menu every week and provide some specials that are on your website, give some customer testimonials. Now that fresh new content is what Google's looking for. So if you just build your website and leave it for 4 years, which, let's be honest, is very common in the Australian market, then you're not actually optimizing your website for your visitors or for your search engines like Google.
Web Central, building and managing beautifully effective business websites that make the big G very happy. Check out webcentral.com.au/Timbo for exclusive listener offers. Okay, my top 3 attention grabbers from a chat with Paul. Number 1, courage. He's got the courage of a lion. I just loved the fact that he left corporate. He sold blinds on commission for a period of time while he figured out what he was going to do. 20 business plans later, he buys a fruit shop in Mullumbimby. Oh, who wouldn't want to live up there? He then takes on Woolworths. He opens a shop in Sydney. He increases his footprint. Now he's running a 32-store franchise. Courage, team. You've all got it. You just got to act on it. Attention grabber number 2. I like his use of social influencers. Asking people who love what you do and what your business stands for and see how they can help spread the word about your business. They're out there for sure. Every business has got them. And, you know, while this happens organically, Black Milk, an interview I did with the guys from Black Milk about 4 or 5 years ago is a great example of how their social influencers have just organically spread the word. I'll put a link in the show notes to that interview. It was an absolute cracker. You can also overtly encourage social interviewers to act. In fact, in an interview next week that I share, my guest explains how he's done that. Attention grabber number 3. I loved Paul's approach to local area marketing. You know, it was quite strategic. I like how he integrated himself and his business into the Mullumbimby community. Can I just say that word one more time? Mullumbimby. It's great. So what are you going to do to genuinely embed yourself into your local community if that in fact is a good marketing strategy for you? And it may well be. I'd love to hear. Hey, what grabbed your attention? Head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/329 and leave me a comment.
Hey Timbo, Andrew here, Chief Change Agent from Fidessa and host of the Safety on Tap podcast. I thought it was fitting to give you a hat tip since you've had such an impact on my success in reaching the first anniversary in my business. I started out thinking that I had great networks and was good at my craft, and so the work would just flow. You know how that goes. You've taught me stuff, you've made me think, you've challenged me and inspired me. I've got a tidy web presence, building email lists. I'm blogging, using video to great effect. I've got a healthy social media presence. I've launched the Safety on Tap podcast and increasing my public speaking. That might sound like I've just tried everything in the book, but it's all part of my clever overall marketing strategy where everything fits into place with a purpose. It's far from perfect, but going from good to great. And with all of that, I'm not only feeding my 5 kids, I'm helping to make a dent in the world by helping others. Thanks, Timbo. I'll send you a piece of birthday cake. See ya.
5 kids, and you've achieved all that as well? Andrew, you are a machine. Everyone else, that is a motivated business owner right there. An action taker if ever I've heard one. Thanks, Andrew, for sharing your wins and inspiring others to do the same. Absolutely terrific. It's now time for part 3 of Insanely Clickable Email Subject Lines. Now, if you missed part 1 and 2, go back and have a listen to the last couple of episodes where I've shared the first 10 ways of creating insanely clickable email subject lines. But in case you didn't realise, a key factor in whether your emails get opened or not can be heavily influenced by the catchiness, the stickiness of your email subject line. Just take a moment to think about how you decide whether to open an email or not. And you'll see what I mean. Yeah? The way you scan through your inbox and decide what you're going to open. I saw a stat recently also over on HubSpot that 40% of emails are opened on mobiles first, where the average mobile screen can only fit 4 to 7 words. So that's something worth keeping in mind as well. Although I know some of the email subject lines I share here do exceed seven words. So here's 5 more styles of subject lines with examples that will make sure your emails get opened. And a big thank you again to Emily Dowdle, who put these together over at optinmonster.com. Okay, number 11, how to. You see, how is one of the most powerful words in email subjects because it guarantees that your email is going to be informative. Everyone wants to know how. We know why, we know what, we just need to know how to do it. We love that. So, you could have an email subject line if you were a consultant. How to increase your prices, hey? People are going to open that. What about that famous old book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? We could learn something from that as well. It's a good headline. Probably can't use it. It's been used before, but how is very powerful. All right, number 12, interesting news. I like this one. It's best if you have an announcement. Keep the subject line simple and focused on how the news affects the recipient of the email. So, for example, if you're a shoe shop, you could say, big news, our range just doubled. Or if you're a cafe owner, you could say, big news, we're now open from 6 a.m. So news works. Strategy number 13, be fascinating. There's something very alluring about being in on a secret. We all like that. You feel special. So, for example, if you were, say, a beauty salon, you could have an email subject line using fascination, which read 15 makeup secrets that will blow your mind. And in brackets, you could have number 7 is crazy. Hey? Getting people a bit fascinated. Or you could say number 7 is cray-cray. Isn't that what the young people of today say? Number 14, personalised. Okay, Add the recipient's name to the subject line. All the email software systems allow you to do that these days. I don't think enough people do it. Add their name to the subject line. In fact, go further and be location specific, because location specific emails have particularly high open rates. So again, if you're a cafe owner, you could say, Emma, here's the 5 best lunch deals in Sydney, or something to that effect. So nice and personalised. And number 15, be threatening. Oh, this sounds a bit controversial, but fear is a very, very powerful emotion. Email subject lines like, if you're a chiropractor, say, 5 signs you're at risk of back injury, that's going to get opened. It'll resonate with readers. Another way of being threatening with an email subject line could be, ignore this email at your peril. Now, before I close off that segment, you might be thinking, oh, but these sound all a bit gimmicky. Well, maybe they are. But guess what? They work, all right? So lose that limiting belief around gimmicky or spammy or whatever and just test what I've been sharing over the last few weeks. I'll have the remaining 5 in next week's episode. That'll bring us to 20, and I hope you are benefiting from them. Well, that almost wraps up another episode of the Small Business Big Marketing Show, your favourite marketing podcast, I hope. If it is, leave a review over on iTunes. Hey, got some great interviews coming up, including a young bloke who started a snow touring business that's now wholesaling to the likes of Qantas and Jetstar. Plus, at the ripe old age of 31, he owns 6 hotels in Japan. Oh, I love that. I do love what I do, getting under the hood with motivated and successful business owners from around the world and finding out what makes them tick, what gets them out of bed in the morning, and how marketing plays a big role in that, because it usually does. Marketing is everything, and everything is marketing. You know, recently I risked my life for you guys just to see if racing car sponsorship was a good way to grow your business. Here's me squeezing into a Porsche before being thrown around a racetrack at up to 240 kilometres an hour. Hello, Steve. Leg in. Mate, those legs are too long for a racing car Porsche.
Slide your backside all the way back.
What's that?
Slide your backside back.
Slide my backside. Oh, back. Yeah. There's plenty happening in that backside right now, let me tell you.
Just as long as you keep it contained, it's all good.
Where's the ventilation system, Steve? Are we all right?
Plenty of air blowing in.
Plenty of air blowing in, plenty of air blowing out, let me tell you. Well, that was an amazing day, and out of it came some really useful insights and ideas around race car sponsorship and sponsorship in general. You can hear that full episode over at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com, or, even better, subscribe free on iTunes. Then you'll never, ever miss another episode. Hey, be sure to grab a free hard copy of the Key Person of Influence book over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo, but only if you want to become more visible, valued and connected in your industry. And I'm guessing you do, right? And remember, you are who Google says you are. So be sure to visit webcentral.com.au/Timbo if you'd like a custom website built and managed for you. Or maybe you just want to bring your current one to the 21st century. Hey, if you love the Small Business Big Marketing Show, then go and pay it forward by letting another business owner know about it. Maybe one who could do with a little bit of marketing love, because there is plenty more where this came from. Until next week, I'm Timbo Reid. Always have been, always will be. Thanks for listening to the Small Business Big Marketing Show. May your marketing be the best marketing. Bye for now.